Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Jeff Bonasek. Jeff has been designing, implementing, and supporting a variety of accounting systems for over 30 years. Jeff is the principal solutions architect for all Quisitive ERP product offerings. He is certified in Sage Intacct, Microsoft Dynamics SL and GP, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, and Uninet Project Management Systems. Jeff, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Marion, and good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Today, we are going to be focusing on Intacct Visual Explorer, which is one of the newer modules that's come out with Sage Intacct over the last couple of years or so. The genesis of this product was moving from it was to address the changing needs of our CFOs and controllers today. In the past, we've been focusing on looking backwards, finding out what happened. In the last 10 years or so, we've been focusing on what has happened with dashboards and so on and so forth. And now we're moving forward and looking at what we should be doing or what may be happening in the future. And Interactive Visual Explorer is designed here to help us do that. Looking at how Sage overall is addressing this, Sage is running a process in which we are creating intelligence in our general ledger. It's really made up of three major components. The first is a continuous audit. A little bit later today, we'll be going over outlier detection and how that helps us continue to audit our data. And that helps us move towards this eliminating the close. So that is, again, the idea that we are closing each and every day when we get to the end of the month. We have just one day finally to close the system. But by auditing and closing each day and trusting our data, that then moves us into data that is trustable inside of Sage Intacct. And therefore, what can we do with that? How can we provide that information to the consumers of that data so they can make timely business decisions? And that's really what the Visual Explorer tool is known and is designed for. Interactive Visual Explorer, or IVE for short, I may use that term throughout this presentation, is a tool that will allow you to visualize the data inside of Sage Intacct. And this is embedded inside of Sage Intacct, so it's part of Sage Intacct. It's not a third-party product. It's not an extraction that needs to happen on a nightly basis. Instead, it's looking at your data real time and displaying that data to consumers of that data so they can make timely business decisions. So what is it? It is an analytical tool, or a set of tool sets, I should say, that allows you to create presentation quality graphs, charts, maps, and it is interactive, meaning because it runs on top of Sage Intacct, you have the ability to drill into the details of what makes up these graphs, visual reports, and so on and so forth. It is easy to use. And in fact, we're going to go through a quick demonstration where we're going to build a chart for today, and it is ready to go. So unlike some of the other visualization tools out there where you need to install it, configure it, work on time on building your data models, this comes pre-configured and ready to go. So what I'm going to do today, I did very little setup in doing so, and you'll see just how very easily I can begin building useful charts and graphs directly from IVE. It provides insight into what's happening inside of your organization, what's happening inside of your ERP solution. It gives you the analysis to dive deeper into what's going on with it. So it's deeper than just producing reports. It provides visualization of that, and it creates presentation quality graphs, reports, maps, things like that, which can be exported directly from IVE into things like PowerPoint or can be placed on dashboards, which Sage Intacct provides out of the box as well. So you could create some IVE graphs and then display them on dashboards for the consumers of those reports. Where of its strengths, strengths is really just about providing information at a glance, and that information that's found within inside of Sage Intacct. And it tells a story about your data. So unlike a report, which is showing the specific details, it visualizes that to tell a story. Why do we do that? Is because people comprehend things differently when they're presented to them visually. And so we find that graphs and charts and visualizations are working their way into things like annual reports. One needs to just take a look at your investments and to see the graphs that are being provided to you as well. And so we think it's a tool that helps us visualize the data better so that at a glance, people can understand what is happening and going on with the data they find in the system. It provides many different types of graphs, including tables, pivot tables, bar charts, pie charts, scatter charts, radar charts, and maps of your data. These are all building blocks that you can use with inside of IVE to represent the data that you want to pull out of Sage Intacct. It also provides predictive analytics. So that concept of looking forward to understand what has happened, and if I continue at this pace, what will happen in the future. So it'll show trend lines, it'll show clusters, outliers, forecasts, and reference lines. All of these are building blocks within inside of IVE that we can use to visualize our data. So enough about what the tool is and how it's used. Let's talk a little bit of, let's go through a demonstration of it so you can actually see it work. And my goal here is that I want to create a visualization of my outstanding accounts receivable by customers visually. And in addition to that, I'd like to add some details behind that so that the users can understand of the outstanding AR, what makes up that outstanding AR, so they can maybe make a timely business decision about how to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my presentation here, and we're going to jump to Sage Intacct. So this is my copy of Sage Intacct, and I'm logged into this nonprofit company on my compliance dashboard right now. So the IVE is found under Reports. It's a new option here. In the past, you've probably seen financial graphs and reports and custom reports. We now have this new tool here called Interactive Visual Explorer. I'm going to go ahead and select it. Now, any visualizations I've created in the past are stored here. And a little bit later, I'll show you a library that comes out of the box. So Sage has taken the time and energy to build a number of visualizations that you might want to use or use as the basis of building your own visualizations. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and create a new one by clicking Add to create a new visualization. I come to this screen here, we'll have to define a couple of things. This is an area where I could say, hey, do I want to create a new visualization? Or do I want to create from an existing board? So if I have one, or Sage has created one that's very similar to what I want, I just want to change it, I would choose that as my starting point. But instead, I'm going to create from scratch because I want you to see how quickly we can put one of these together. There are two areas I do need to fill out. The first is reporting area. So what am I reporting on? The second is, what am I going to call this visualization? So as you notice, when I choose reporting area, it lists all the areas where you can find data inside of Sage Intacct. Projects, GL, AP, AR, all the areas within inside of Sage Intacct. Now I know because I want a listing of my outstanding invoices, that AR invoices is the area where I want to focus on. And if there's any part that takes a little bit of time, that's just understanding the data views and where it is, where you will find the data is that you're looking for to produce your visualization. Next part is easy. I just give the visualization a name. I'm going to call it JMV, which are my initials, and I'm going to call it Outstanding AR by Customer. All right. Now there are some properties. I can create audiences. We can help you manage a large number of visualizations and report types. Don't necessarily need to do that. It's optional. I'm going to go ahead and skip that and just say create visualization. Takes a moment or two for it to spin up and generate our visualization building board. Okay, so a couple basics about it. This overall piece here we call a canvas. This is a place that we're going to start building the visualization. Over on the left here, these are our data sources, where data is coming from. On the left-hand side of the canvas are the areas where we define what we're going to visualize and how we're going to visualize it. So is it stacked bar chart, or am I going to do a line chart, for example? So I'm going to do a horizontal bar chart for this case. And then what are my x-axes and my y-axes? Very similar to the types of visualizations you may do using Excel, do pivot tables, for example. And then down the bottom here, we have some legend title things where I can pretty up the report to get it to look exactly the way I want to. But let's see, today we want to look at outstanding accounts receivable by customer. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and add the customer name to this report, which I will do by taking a look at the invoice detail. And I happen to know under related objects, I want to look at the AR invoice itself. There it is. And in the AR invoice, you see a listing of all the fields that are available to you from that AR invoice. And I happen to know, I'm going to grab this, pull it over a second here, that customer name is the first thing I want. So I'm just going to click and drag that on over here into the graph. And you see that that creates the y-axis for me. Now that's my first piece of data, which is customer name. It says no data found right now because it doesn't have 2 points to relate together. So we've got to give it a second point to be able to do so. And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and add the invoice amount to this visualization. Now, most all the amounts I'm looking for will be found under this area here called measures. And Sage Intacct very nicely puts a number sign next to it, so you know these are transaction or number amounts that you're looking for. Notice that the customer has an A in front of it, alphanumeric, meaning it's a character based. And so there's these visual cues that help you manage and navigate between the fields that you may want. And so I just want the base invoice amount, which I'm going to drag over to my x-axis. And there it is. Very quickly, I've got a listing by customer name of all the invoices that I've created with inside this organization. Now, I could have easily, you'll notice I also see total paid, so I could have easily showed total paid in this listing here as well. So I see both invoice amount and total paid, and I can see the differences between those two. And I see there's a delta here, so I clearly have an outstanding invoice. And that's more information than I want to present right now, because really what I want to show is what is my outstanding AR for this. And I look at the listing of numbered fields or dollar measures, and I notice that there isn't an outstanding invoice amount. However, I do know there's a base invoice amount and total paid, so I can calculate the difference between those two, and that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to come down to my calculations and say, hey, I would like to add a new calculation. And now I'm going to take data from my data model, including base amount. I could have typed the word amount if I wanted to, but I like to drag. And then subtract from it the amount paid. Let's try that again. There you go. And we're going to call this total due. Let's say save. And having done so, I now have this additional field here called total due. I'm going to remove these two x-axes and move the total due to the x-axis, which now gives me a new number, which is what the outstanding amount is, or total due for invoices for these customers. What I'd like to do next is sort this by total amount, because you can see there's some customers that don't owe me anything, and there are others that owe me a lot. And I want to really see the biggest ones on top, largest to smallest, which I'll easily do by choosing sort by, total due, and do high to low. And now I've reorganized that data in that fashion. I also don't like the color because yellow is not my favorite color, blue is my favorite color. So I'm going to come to my color palette here, and I'm going to say I would like to take the total due and place it in the color in which I'd like you to scale, meaning change the color based upon the amount that's total due. So it emphasizes this over that. But again, I don't like that color, so I'm going to revisualize the colors in blue because I like blue a lot. But I want you to notice that you have an entire color palette to work with. So you can choose whatever scale, color scale you might necessarily want to be able to see and visualize what those outstanding AR amounts are. That looks good to me now. I also noticed that I have a number of customers here that don't owe me anything. I'd like to go ahead and get rid of those. So I'm going to take the total due and add it, drop it down here to my filters. And the filter builds for me a max and min range. And so I'm going to say, hey, I want to see 1 cent or more to a max range very, very large, called 99 million. Let's see, $1 to 99 million. There we go. And now instantly I've filtered the report to only show customers that owe me $1 or more. And I've gotten rid of the rest of all of the other customers who don't owe me anything, because for this visualization, I just want to see what my outstanding AR is. I now say, okay, well, this looks good. This is just about what I want, but I also want to provide to the user the ability to see what makes up these outstanding invoices. I know it's $125,000 from Slytherin, but what makes up with that $125,000? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to my canvas here, and I'm just going to double click on it to relabel it, and then I'm going to call this AR total due, and rename that. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a new canvas. So I'm adding a second tab to this visualization. And in that new canvas, what I want to do is grab my total due and drop it over here. Well, I see my total due is 297,000. Doesn't really tell me a whole lot about what's total due there. So I want to have a little bit more detail. So I'm going to change my visualization to be a table, because I want to see a table of the data. Again, I have 297,000. Doesn't tell me a whole lot about it. But what I want to do now is I want to add, let's add the customer name. It'd be nice to know who that is. Let's add the invoice number and the invoice date so I can see each of those and then be able to understand a little bit better. So I'm going to come back again to that invoice, and I'm going to look for the invoice date, which is one of my fields here. There's the date of the invoice. I'm going to drag it in. Now it redesigns the view with the invoice date. And I'm going to grab the invoice number. There's the invoice number. We'll put it there. And I'm going to again grab that customer name. Drag it right there. And now I have a listing of all the invoices and their total due by customer with the invoice number and the invoice date. And I can change the order of these if I need to or want to. So if I want the invoice date to be first, I can drag it up there and then reorder it. So now I can see by customer and date and so on and so forth. But again, I have a bunch of $0 customers here that's sort of filling up my list. I just want to focus on the ones that are due. So again, I'm going to take that invoice total for this visualization and put it into our filter, and I'm going to build that same filter where the amount needs to be $1 to 99 million or 9 million. There we go. And now I've instantly sorted that data to just those customers that have a total due available or to total due for us. Now, I like to see subtotals because I do see one customer sort of repeating, so I want to see the total they owe me as well as each individual invoice, and I'll go ahead and choose show subtotals, which will then build in some subtotals for me. And I get now nicely a listing of each customer and what their outstanding balances are. There's our Slytherin has one invoice for $125,000. Interesting, big customer for us, I guess. Now I'm going to call this then. Double click on the canvas number, invoice details. We'll just say invoices. There we go for that visualization. Now I'm going to come back to my total AR customer due, and I'm going to add some filters to this because I may want to be able to focus in on different segments of my company, maybe different departments, product lines, or different customers or groups of customers. And I'm going to do that by first putting the customer name up here for the filter. And we'll go ahead and select all of them. And then the visualization will redesign with all the customers. There we go. You see each of my customers. And so I could filter, for example, on Slytherin. If I just wanted to see Slytherin, and it would change my visualization to just Slytherin. Or I could use groups of customers, or I could just go ahead and select all customers and make them part of my visualization. In addition, I want to do this by fund. My organization carries many different funds, and that is one of my dimensions. So I'm going to go back to my dimensional list and find my funds and say I would like to also carry it by the fund name. I drag it up here. And so now I can either do it by customer, by fund, or a combination of customers and funds. In this case, I'm going to choose just general as my general fund. And you'll see that the visualization has been changed and filtered to just the general fund. Now, if I click on invoices, you'll note that the invoices still shows me a list of all the invoices. That's because this visualization is not tied to this one. Let's go ahead and do that. And we do that by coming up to the filters and saying, I would like to push pin to all canvases, meaning I'm pushing this filter to all canvases, which would be the invoice canvas. I'm going to do the same here, push pin this to all canvases as well. And now when I go back to invoices, you'll see that the invoices is being resorted and regrouped to meet the filters that I built on the first page of the report. And so again, if I go back here and then just choose all funds, select all, this report regenerates, and then the invoice list, of course, is going to regenerate as well. So that is my visualization. I'm going to save that. You can see where I can export that to a file, and in doing so, I could do it to either a PowerPoint file, so if I wanted to put it on a presentation, a PDF, whatever I might necessarily need to do. But I can also then go ahead and save that on a dashboard, so I can add that to a dashboard. So I want to finish with one final thing, and that is I'm going to go back to Visual Explorer. And I mentioned that Sage, this is plug and play, ready to go. Sage has included a library of reports that they've already pre-built for you, and you can use as your starting point of creating any visualizations. They're also a really good tool in understanding some of the feature functionality you might necessarily want to do. So let me go ahead and pull up AP over time analysis, and you'll see a more sophisticated visualization, which we go ahead and run. And it takes a moment or two to build it as it's gathering all my data inside of Sage Intacct. All right, so this is my AP over time. I'm looking at it over different quarters. You'll notice I've got a bunch of different palettes down here. So then this is bills over time, which I'm showing names of vendors. Interestingly enough, it's scatter points, plots, and percentages. Bills by department over time, and then those by location over time. And of course, I have all these filters up top here, like we were building, to be able to filter this report by. And then finally, there's a similar report in the accounts receivable. So this is the aging analysis. And run that one. So the point there is that this is a product that is ready to plug and play, meaning you install, get it configured, and you already have visualizations that have been specifically by Sage Intacct to use as your starting point to work with. So in summary, as we move towards the continuous close and trusting our data so that we can now present it to users, we can use IVE or Intacct Visual Explorer as a tool to visualize this data and present it to our customers either on dashboards or send it to them via PowerPoints so that they can better visualize the data that's found inside of Sage Intacct. And again, this is all embedded inside of Sage Intacct, so there's no extracting your data, no waiting until the data refreshes the night before. Every transaction that's posted as of right now ends up in this visualization because it's pulling directly from Sage Intacct. And Marion, if you could close us out, I'd appreciate it.
I just want to say thank you, Jeff, for providing us with this great information. And thanks for all of you for joining us for this interactive Visual Explorer session.